Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, definitely sign up for my newsletter so you can learn even more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, our guest today is Peter Mond. Peter Mond is the director of In the Quiet Space Center, and he's also the author of 2 books, The Birth of a Stone and The Life of a Stone. You can find out more about Peter Mond and his wonderful work at www.calmcoping.com. Welcome, Peter Mond.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you for having me.
And Peter Mond is joining us today from Israel. So Peter Mond, will you share with everyone about where you live in Israel?
I live in Tzfad, which is a town in the north of Israel. It's 15 minutes away from the Lebanese border. So we hear all what's going on. It's also one of the most known spiritual centers in the world, Tzfad. People come here from all over the world in order to connect up to spirituality. And we've had the privilege of living here for 40 years.
What a blessing. Now, Peter Mond, we're going to be talking for our audience today about past life regression. What is past life regression?
First of all, I should start with what is past life before we get to the regression. And past life is former incarnations, which means that the soul reincarnates in a different body at a different time. And what is important, especially for our discussion today, is that the soul, when it goes from life to life, it brings along its baggage with it, in inverted commas. The issues that it hasn't haven't been settled in the past. The relationships which were problematic maybe in the past. Physical problems, emotional problems. It brings things with it that need to be dealt with. And I find that the best way to explain anything is to tell a story. So let me start with a story. There was this devout Jew who lived in Poland about 200 years ago. And he used to go every year to visit his rabbi at the time of the New Year holiday. So off he went. And on the way, he stopped at a village. And there were only a few Jews that lived in this village. There were nine men. And they asked him to stay on for the holiday because you can't pray together unless you have 10 people. You have to have a quorum, and there have to be 10 men. But he didn't want to stay because he wanted to be with his rabbi. That was his tradition. And so he apologized that he had to go on and he couldn't stay with them. So he went on and he came to the rabbi's town, which is called Lublin, which is in the southeast of Poland. And the rabbi didn't want to speak to him, didn't recognize him, didn't acknowledge him at all. So he'd made all this effort to visit his rabbi, and his rabbi didn't want to have anything to do with him, which was a bit disappointing for him. So the whole holiday, he was basically depressed when he should have been happy. And at the end of the holiday, he went to say goodbye to the rabbi, and the rabbi saw on his face what he'd been experiencing in the last day or two. And he said to him, and this rabbi, his name is the Seer of Lublin. So you understand from the name that he had exceptional psychic ability. And he said to him, you need to know that you only came into this life in order to be the 10th man in this quorum of Jews on this holiday. That's the end of the story. What happened after that, I have no idea. But that's just one small example of what of the baggage that we bring into our lives without any idea that we're carrying this baggage around with us. And what past life regression provides, is the opportunity to access these memories from a past life. This rabbi, he didn't need to do past life regression. He didn't need to know what what your birthday was. He saw on a person's face his past life. But this past life regression is very is more for our world, and what it does is it provides the opportunity through guided relaxation and then guided imagination, and you are able to access memories from your past life. That's basically in a nutshell what past life regression does.
Oh, great explanation, Peter Mond. Now, in my work as a medical intuitive healer, sometimes when I'm tracing back the origin of an issue, so let's say somebody's dealing with alcoholism, right? So I may trace back, where did this pattern start? And I feel that we have enough issues to deal with in this life, but sometimes the root of what we're struggling with goes to a past life. So for example, myself, I can give some personal examples. So when I was younger, I suffered from eating disorders twice. And as part of the healing, I went into a past life. I actually had several past lives where I was actually starving, which is completely understandable, right? So if you had a past life where you were starving, there was not enough food, and you didn't fully resolve that, then you could understand why somebody might have an eating issue in this life. And I find it interesting that you and I are speaking, and you're in Israel. I've done many healing sessions for myself about being a little girl at the time of Nazi Germany. And I was hiding under a table. It wasn't safe to be seen. And I can, through many, many sessions, being yanked out from under the table by my pigtails and shipped off in a cattle car, to an extermination camp, right? And so when we, as healers, look at all of human experience, when we think about what human beings have been throughout history, slavery, genocide, war, these are some experiences that were extremely traumatic that are part of the human experience. Another example I can give from a past life, I was actually doing healing just recently, and I was a gladiator, and I came out into the, arena, and there was a lion who attacked me from the back and tore a hole in the back of my heart. So, and in a past life regression, I saw everything. I didn't re-experience the pain, but I saw it all. Now, Peter Mond, how did you find out about past life regression?
I was very fortunate to find a teacher. This was about 20 odd years ago. He was a doctor of philosophy. He was a teacher of Jewish spirituality. And we studied together for a few years until his untimely death. And he decided he wanted to develop a new career. And he'd heard about life between lives therapy, which had been developed by Michael Newton in America in the 1990s. And so off he went to America to study. And then he came back, and one of the requirements of the course was to practice past life regression. Because through past life regression, you would get to that stage which Newton called life between lives, where the soul individual soul meets up with a group of soul elders and discusses their past life. So this is how I was introduced to past lives. It wasn't something that I thought that I needed, or I didn't really know much about it at all. But I was his first pupil to do past life regression, and I was quite happy to help him. And it turned out to be an extremely, extremely significant event in my life.
So would you be willing to share with our audience what insights you had about your own past life regressions?
Yeah. I would describe, first of all, what took place. Because it was a past life regression. In my regression, it was divided very, very, very clearly between two parts. In the first part, I'm introduced or induced into a state of deep relaxation, which is fine. And then starts the guided imagination, and he invites me to go into a past life. And I discovered for the first time that I'd had a past life as a Jewish teenager in the Warsaw Ghetto. And my job was to be a smuggler, like many others, providing food for my family. I had a large family. I had parents and 3 sisters and 2 brothers and aunts and uncles, and they didn't have what to eat. So I would go outside the ghetto like many others and find food one way or another, until at one stage I was caught by a German soldier, put up against the wall of the ghetto and shot. That was the first stage of the past life regression. It was very matter of fact. It was relaxed. There was nothing difficult about it at all. And then Mark asked me, because he wanted to carry on to the next stage where the soul meets up with this group of soul elders. So he said, he invited me to say farewell to my family from that life. And then the second stage started. And what happened was that I experienced the most intense cathartic experience I've ever experienced in my life. It was like, if you can imagine, what it's like when a hole is made in a dam, and the waters come through. It just come pouring through. I just immediately on the spot broke down, started crying. It wasn't crying, it was weeping. It was something I'd never experienced in my life before. It was weeping from a place that I didn't even know existed inside of me. And I just wept and wept, and I have no idea how long. It just went on and on until all the waters from the dam came through. It just went on and on. And then Mark carried on with this meeting between the soul and that was totally irrelevant as far as I was concerned then. It was such an overwhelming and intense experience that that was it. There was nothing else as far as I was concerned. It was just feeling the pain. It was feeling the pain of separating from my family then, especially my 3 sisters. That became very significant, which I will probably talk about a little bit later.
Great examples for our audience. And I'd like to add in a couple of other examples, both from my own life and also from working with clients. So in my own life, when I was younger, I suffered from tremendous, very deep depression. And in the series of healing work, then it became revealed to me, and I saw that I was one of the soldiers who had crucified Christ, Jesus Christ, and just regular soldier who was there. And when at the time when all this happened, I didn't understand the magnitude of what I was doing. But once I realized at the soul level what I had participated in, I went into a severe, horrific depression. And then I poisoned myself. So I drank some kind of poison. All this came back to me through visual images and a recollection of my soul. So I literally poisoned myself. I committed suicide by drinking poison. And that was at the soul level, the root of a very deep depression. And so by recalling that memory of what had happened and my role in it, it really did help to shift some of the depression. And here's an example from my work with clients over the years. I remember years ago, decades ago, working with this gentleman, and he came to me for, actually, this is quite interesting, for back pain. So you would think with back pain, you know, I might start with yoga or some sort of physical work, but in his case, it was that he needed deep spiritual healing for his back work. And he was an international businessman, so he traveled all over the world for business. And his language was quite interesting, because his language was literally torture language, like, you know, so and so put me over the rack, and so on. And so in a series of healings, it came out that he had been a prisoner in a dungeon and he had been tortured. And so the imprint, the soul imprint of that life was so significant that it was carrying forward into physical pain in this lifetime. And then he had another lifetime. And what was funny was I saw this and I explained this to him, and then he also recalled it at the same time. And then also I saw that in another lifetime he had been in the wild, and he'd been literally speared in the back by some sort of wild animal. I'm not a wild animal expert. So, but it was something with some kind of horn had stuck him in the back. So, and what was interesting, by going through these past life regressions, that his pain began to significantly dissipate. So in your experience, Peter Mond, can past life regression empower people to heal emotional or physical wounds from the past?
Absolutely. And I'll give you a couple of examples before I get to my example. But a couple of very short stories. One is the story of a rabbi who had a phobia about taking showers. And it had nothing to do with water, because he was okay with swimming pools or the sea or a bath or whatever. And he had no idea where it came from. And it was only after he did a past life regression that he understood he was in a concentration camp and he had experienced the showers, in inverted commas, in the gas chambers. And after the past life regression, his anxiety, his phobia disappeared. Another one was another story is of a woman who had neck pains. And she, for years, went to doctors and did x-rays, and they examined her here and they examined her there, but they couldn't find any source of her pain until she did a past life regression. And then she discovered she had been hanged by the neck. And after that, her pains disappeared. So something very similar happened to me. For years before I did the past life regression, I used to imagine, and this was only when I was alone. So it was probably when I was most of the time was when I was in the car by myself. I used to imagine that my wife and children were going to die, going to be killed one way or another. And every time I would imagine it, I would start crying. I had absolutely no idea where this came from. I had no traumas in my life. Nobody had died on me, in inverted commas. I hadn't experienced any separations of one kind or another. Absolutely nothing. I hadn't been interested in the Holocaust at all. I hadn't seen films about anything, nothing to do with the Holocaust. On top of that, I was an experienced psychiatric social worker for many years. I'd seen a load of all the psychiatric symptoms you can imagine. I'd never, ever come across a symptom like that, imagining that. So I kept it to myself. It was so strange, and it was so private that I just couldn't speak to anybody about it. I could have gone to the head psychiatrist, but I'm not sure what he would have thought. He would probably put me on some pills straight away just to check if, to calm me down or whatever. I didn't even speak to my wife. And all this was up until the past life regression. After the past life regression, it disappeared. 99, not totally, 99%. I still get, it's like a relic from an ancient past. 2 or 3 times a year, I still imagine someone is going to get killed. But no tears. I think I've cried enough now for both lives. And it's come up a little bit more lately, which is more understandable because there's so much going on in this country that you never know what's going to happen to who next. But it was so clear that after the past life regression, that thing which was inside of me, carrying around inside of me for 40 years and how many years, suddenly exploded and came out, and that relieved me of an unsolved issue from the past.
And with that, let's take a break and listen to a message from one of our commercial sponsors. You here at UK Health Radio, you're listening to the Natural Healing Show. My name is Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, and we're speaking to author Peter Mond about past life regression. We'll be right back. So Peter Mond, again, if you think about human history and what all humans have experienced over the years, and not just literally over, thousands and thousands of years, and how that can show up at the soul level with what's happening in our lives now. One of the things that you talk about is that souls are known to come back together in soul groups. First of all, what is a soul group?
For what I understand, it's souls who were together in a past life, and for whatever reason, they have to come back. And while I was doing my past life regression, I identified my 3 sisters as 3 people who are in my family today, part of my family today. One, the elder sister, Sarah, is my wife, Pamela, Sarah. And the other 2 sisters, who are much younger, are 2 of my daughters. And I'd just like to throw this out to those people who are listening. The question, what has to happen in order for 2 souls, and we were together in the Warsaw Ghetto, to meet up at some stage later in another life? So Pamela and I are the same age. We are from the same town in England, Brighton. Our families went to the same synagogue. We met in Israel. We had to move 4,000 kilometers in order to meet up. But how did we get to Israel? Pamela was walking down Regent Street, which is in the West End of London. She saw a sign. It said the Jewish Agency. She had no idea what it was. She didn't know what the Jewish Agency was. She thought it was something to do with modeling or clothes or fashion or something. So she went in. She discovered that the Jewish Agency helps people who want to visit Israel or go and live in Israel. She went in with no idea what Israel was, no thoughts about coming to Israel. She left with a ticket to come to Israel and to go and study. She was a student then, and to go to an institute for students from all over the world and study in Israel and learn about the culture, the language, the history, and so on. That was Pamela. That was in 1971. In 1974, I just finished my studies. I'd learned Russian and Soviet studies. Very useful then. But I had to decide what to do after that. I just finished the BA, and I had absolutely no idea what to do with my life. And so if you don't know what to do, the best thing is just carry on doing what you're doing anyway. So I got accepted to do a master's in Russian and Soviet studies. And then the Yom Kippur War broke out, and somehow it affected me, and I had to make a decision. I'm going to go and study Russian and Soviet studies and do what? Or go to Israel. So I went to Israel, not knowing what to do, what I was going to do. I went on a kibbutz. As soon as I got off the plane, and Pamela had the same feeling, I knew I wasn't going back. Okay, so the two souls have arrived. That took so many years. But the two souls have to meet up. How are they going to meet up? So my parents had moved to Israel, and my father started learning to speak Hebrew. He wanted someone to teach him to speak Hebrew. So he found a Hebrew teacher. This Hebrew teacher, by chance, just happened to be studying in an institute for learning Judaism in Tel Aviv. By chance, Pamela was also studying in the same institute. They got together, they became friends. And then the teacher found out that Pamela was from the same town that I was from. And she mentioned this to my father. And by chance, he mentioned it to my mother. And by chance, my mother mentioned it to me. And then I rang her up. But the end, just coming to the end of the story. So I rang her up and we arranged to meet. And I went to the flat the apartment where she was staying with the Hebrew teacher, and knocked on the door. She opened the door and I went in. Okay. Since then, we've been together. She told me years after, that when she opened the door, she saw her brother. She has two brothers in this life. I don't look like any of the brothers. So, and Pamela is far more spiritually developed than I am. So she felt something. And it was only after the past life regression that we could really make the connection between that past life and the present life. But she felt something.
So that's a great story. And I do agree with you that a lot of times that people we have a very close connection to in this lifetime, we've had many other lifetimes with. So for example, I have a client who's been married over 50 years, and she's worried about her husband eventually passing away, which is understandable. And I was like, don't worry, you've been together in many other lifetimes. You'll be together again. And I remember probably over 15 years ago doing a past life regression for myself. And in that lifetime, I had been with the individual who was in this lifetime is my mentor in healing. And at that time, we were living in France, and there was a terrible pestilence, both a famine and horrific disease. And she and I somehow had the skills and talents, and we helped everyone survive the famine and survive the basically the plague at that time. Well, what's interesting, fast forward, you know, of course, in 2020, the pandemic started, and I'm not going to get into any controversies about COVID, but she and I both helped all kinds of people get through COVID before, during, and after COVID. But I find it quite interesting. It wasn't until recently that I thought, well, we've had a past life helping people overcome pestilence and famine. So of course we innately, intuitively know how to do that now, right? And I have many clients who are talented artists of all kinds, and they've had many lifetimes as an artist, so that as they recall that skill, their soul skill, they've done that many times. And for example, for myself, in my work as a medical intuitive healer, I had a past life in India as some sort of holy person who prescribed herbs, and I would just look in people's eyes and know what was wrong with them and recommend the herbs. I had another past life as an herbalist to a court, to a king. And I had a past life as an Indian woman, and I was a seer for the tribe, and I would give the tribe direction about where we needed to go. So again, I think that many of our talents can be found in these past life regressions, and a deeper understanding about the people who are in our lives as of today. So these are what you're talking about, are soul groups. And with that, let's take a break and listen to another message from one of our commercial sponsors at UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author. We're listening to Peter Mond, author and past life regression expert. So Peter Mond, we are here at the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio, and I interview experts in natural healing from all over the world. What kind of people need or would benefit from past life regression therapy?
I think from all the stories that I've read and from my own experience, which is very small, what you find is that almost all the people have something that bothers them, something that disturbs them, disturbs their sleep, it disturbs their life, it disturbs their health, it disturbs, and they have no idea, absolutely no idea where it's coming from. So I would say to someone, okay, what do we do normally? We go, if something's wrong, first of all, you go to your doctor, and then he sends you for this x-ray and that check and the blood test and everything. Okay, you've been through all the checks, then if that doesn't work, maybe you go to therapy. Okay, you've been through all the... and also the people around you, of course, are probably encouraging you to do exactly that. And very few people will come along and say, oh, why don't you try a past life regression? Actually, I've never heard anybody said that. The only person who ever said it was my teacher. So I would say be open, okay? If you find that there is something that's bothering you and you can't find the solution, like one I read recently about a girl who had, every time she saw black boots, she had it's like an anxiety attack. Okay, so where does she get this from? Where could you possibly get an anxiety like that from? But unless you're open and unless you're listening a little, and unless you have a little wider perspective, you're not going to think about past life regressions. So the more stories that are told, I think, the more opportunities you're giving to people to think that maybe there is something else apart from conventional medicine, conventional therapy, and so on.
Yes, I agree. And again, in my medical intuitive readings, I'm looking at what I call the 5 levels of healing: the physical, energetic, emotional, mental, and spiritual. So past life regression therapy would fall under the spiritual, where there's a spiritual cause to your disease, whether it's physical or mental, emotional. And I gave the example from my own life with severe depression, going back to my past life as a soldier who had persecuted Christ, and the example of my client who'd had terrible back pain, that it went back to a past life where he was literally living for decades in a dungeon being tortured, right? So Peter Mond, you are the author of 2 books, The Life of a Stone, And also The Birth of a Stone and the Life of the Stone. Why did you write the book, The Life of a Stone?
Okay, so I have to tell you a story. That's the only way I can tell you. Actually, first of all, I have to give credit to Sonia Coquette, who I am sure you know. She told me to write the book. She said, write the book about the past lives. So I did. Um, so basically, the book it provides a perspective. It's the overarching perspective of the books are the second book anyway is about past life, present life, and the connections between them. But how did this all come about? So the story. I'll get back to the story because this is how it started, and it's connected to an event which was the most significant event in my life, and it was an event that took approximately, approximately it took me about, it was an event of a quarter of a second, which changed my life.
Mm.
And this happened in 1998 when we were on a family holiday in England, in Brighton. And we'd swapped houses with the family. And I was planning to go on a trip to visit an old school friend who I hadn't seen for many years. So I went down to check the car and I found that the windshield had been stolen. I'd never seen anything like this in Israel, but I was told that it's an old English tradition and there was nothing I could do about it. So no trip. I was very upset, disappointed, angry. And instead of that, by chance, we went on a walk around the town of Brighton, the old part of Brighton, the lanes of Brighton. And we're walking and we passed by a shop and by chance, we decided to go in. It was some sort of New Age shop. And by chance, in the middle of the shop, there was this machine, which I had no idea what it was. It's a Killian photography machine which photographs your auras, which I had no idea what it was, what they were. And okay. So we decided to have our photographs taken. Then I go upstairs with the photograph, and in the room, there is a woman sitting there on a chair, very extremely overweight. And I give her the photograph, and then she starts telling me why red and why orange and what it means. And within a minute of her talking, I had what I call a vision, but it wasn't a vision because I didn't see anything. I didn't hear anything, but I knew something. It was immediate knowledge. I'd never experienced anything like this in my life. And what it said, the message was very clear. The first third of your life will be devoted to the body. The second third will be devoted to the psyche. And the third will be devoted to the spirit. Anything earth-shattering about that? Absolutely not. If you read a bit of Maslow or Erickson or anybody who writes about human development, you will come across such stages. So the content, it wasn't the content, even though I had no idea what a stage of spirit looked like. The only spirit I knew then was whiskey. But the content it wasn't the content, there was something else there. And what it was the process. It was the experience. And what I experienced then, totally clearly, was that I had received a message, and it was nothing to do with me. It had come from somewhere, I knew not where, come from someone, I knew not who, or something. But all I knew was that I had received a message. And that was the catalyst for what happened, what has happened since then, for the last 25 years, and for the changes that took place in my consciousness, for finding a teacher within a year, and the teacher who then invited me to do past life regression, and then starting to write, and the books, and so on and so on. It was this quarter of a second that changed my life.
So Peter Mond, in my life and in my work, I have come upon my past lives in several modalities. I've recalled them during healing sessions, and this is not during hypnosis, but just times when, working on an issue and I'll see what happened. As a medical intuitive healer, I have seen past lives of other clients. And then I'll explain to them, okay, well, you were robbed and killed and, so on. Or, like the gentleman who was speared in the back or in the torture chamber. So I've experienced them for myself in healing work. I've seen it for myself for my clients. And then I've also done past life regression hypnosis, where I've come upon different past lives. Is it necessary for a person to be hypnotized to recall their past lives, or is it possible for a person to remember their past lives like I did, just, in the course of their life?
Well, I can only talk from my experience and what I have, and I've read quite a bit of them. The answer is no, it's not necessary.
Yeah.
And certainly I've never been hypnotized, so I can't tell you what the experience is. But my feeling is that through guided imagination, it is possible to access past lives, and but maybe I need to experience what it's like being hypnotized. Maybe something else will crop up. I don't know. I mean, I'm open to also to that direction.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways to get at the same experience, right? Whether
Yeah.
it's you remember the experience yourself, or someone who's highly trained recalls it for you, and it sort of jogs your memory. Right? So Peter Mond, any final thoughts for our audience about past life regression?
Well, for me, the bottom line of past life regression, not just past life regression, is listening. It's listening to the world. It's listening to events and experiences. And it's listening to the past, and it's listening to the future. In the Jewish tradition, when a person dies, their soul goes up to heaven, and there's an angel waiting for you. And he asks you one question. And the question is, what's your name? Now, you should, by the time all the years you've been living in the world, you should by then have discovered what your name is. So he's not asking you what your name is. The question is, were you your name? And this is what I discovered through writing the books and through the study. My name is Peter Simon Mond. Peter means in Greek, it means in Greek is Petros, which means a stone. But I discovered that in Hebrew it has a totally different meaning. It means opening, and it's written in the Bible, and it's an opening of the womb. It's giving birth to something. And so Peter, and so you can understand the name of my first book, The Birth of a Stone, where it came from. Second name is Simon, which in Hebrew is Shimon, which means to listen. So it's an opening. An opening to listening, and to what to listen. My family name is Mond, which in French means world. So that's the mystery of life, of discovering your name, according to the Jewish tradition, and being who you are meant to be. And who I am meant to be is to be someone who's open to listening to the world, to the events and the experiences in the world, and finding the messages from within these events, and then acting upon them.
Very powerful message. You've been listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer, Amazon #1 bestselling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. Our guest today has been Peter Mond, director of In the Quiet Space Center in Israel. And he's the author of 2 books, The Birth of a Stone and The Life of a Stone. You can find out more about Peter Mond and his wonderful work at www.calmcoping.com. And remember, you are a soul. You have lived through many lifetimes, and the experiences of your previous lives could be affecting you at all levels now. And as you resolve the issues from your past life, you can feel happier and healthier naturally. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.